Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the public opening of the 2025 Fields Medal Symposium, Abacus Medal, honoring Professor Mark Braverman. My name is Deirdre Haskell, and I'm the director of the Fields Institute for Research in the Mathematical Sciences. On behalf of the Institute, thank you for joining us. I wish to acknowledge this land on which the Fields Institute operates. For thousands of years, it has been the traditional land of the Huron-Wendat, the Seneca, and the Mississaugas of the Credit. Today, this meeting place is still the home to many Indigenous people from across Turtle Island, and we're grateful to have the opportunity to work on this land. It is traditional to give the land acknowledgement here in Canada, and it's an opportunity for us to remember the mistakes of the past and try to think about how to make up for them as we move forward. But the most important way to make up for mistakes is to try not to make them in the present and in the future. And it feels important to me personally that we all remember that there are many disputes about land taking place even now in the world, and that we should try to think about the ways in which we can listen with compassion and respect to the competing demands for land and try to resolve problems peacefully. The Fields Medal is the brainchild of the Hamilton-born mathematician John Charles Fields. The inspiration for the medal came during a special meeting hosted here in Toronto just over a century ago, which we commemorated at last year's symposium, Forward from the Fields Medal. Just to recall, in 1924, as the world emerged from a devastating pandemic that followed a devastating world war, Toronto hosted the first International Congress of Mathematicians, which took place outside of Europe. At this meeting, John Charles Fields noted in his welcoming remarks that the exclusive object of science is the improvement of the conditions of humanity, morally, intellectually, economically, and socially. And this is what we hope to continue to do here at the Fields Institute. Fields also kept an abiding faith in young people as the architects of a better tomorrow. True to his vision, the Fields Medal honors mathematicians not only for their achievements to date, but for their promise of even greater intellectual achievements in the future. Like the Fields Medal, the Abacus Medal, previously known as the Nevin Linna Prize, is awarded every 4 years by the International Mathematics Union to an individual under the age of 40, in this case, for work that demonstrates outstanding contributions in the mathematical aspects of theoretical computer science. So some of you may be asking, is this still the Fields Medal Symposium? Yes, it is. This year, we've expanded its scope to honor an Abacus Medal winner, recognizing the inextricably linked relationship between mathematics and theoretical computer science, and looking forward to a future where artificial intelligence plays a major role in the infrastructure of human lives. And in the first day of the Fields Medal Symposium that we've had in the scientific talks today, we've started to hear already about some of the artificial intelligence questions. The 2022 Abacus Medal winner is Mark Braverman. He was recognized not only for his outstanding contributions, but for his natural ability to foster collaboration with students and colleagues, resulting in an impressive output of research, and a strong network of relationships that you can see reflected in the roster of participants this week and in the video we're about to show. Dr. Braverman is known for numerous contributions across theoretical computer science. Advances in the speed and efficiency of the technology we use depend on fundamental research in computer science. Theoretical computer science creates and studies new questions, new connections between applied questions like efficient communication, market algorithms, and physics simulation, and deep mathematical concepts. These connections lead to surprising new practical applications and to a deeper mathematical understanding of fundamental concepts such as information, computation, and algorithmic efficiency. Within theoretical computer science, he's particularly recognized for developing new frameworks for reasoning about communication protocols and for new results connecting theoretical computer science with mathematical analysis, dynamical systems, and market algorithms. But don't just take my word for it. Please join me in welcoming the Honorable Nolan Quinn, Minister of Colleges, Universities, Research Excellence and Security, to deliver a few remarks. Thank you.
Thanks. Thank you for having me. And that title I'm still getting used to, so you say it better than I do. But thank you for that introduction. It's an honor to be here at the Fields Institute this evening. I'd like to first start off by congratulating Professor Mark Braverman, a University of Toronto graduate, on receiving the prestigious Abacus Medal. Dr. Braverman, this award recognizes not only your remarkable achievements in theoretical computer science, but also highlights the profound influence of your research on the broader field of mathematics. Your groundbreaking work, particularly the development of the theory of information complexity, has bridged the gap between deep mathematics concepts and new practical applications of modern technology. It also reminds us that the most profound innovations often begin with fundamental questions and bold thinking. The Fields Institute fosters mathematical excellence in Ontario and around the world. Through events like today's, you're not only honoring the achievements of an Abacus Medal laureate, but also demonstrating why you are globally recognized as a premier hub for mathematics research excellence. Ontario is home to a world-class sector of researchers whose discoveries improve lives, drive our economy, and further cement our province as an incredible place to invest and do business. And the work being done here at the Fields Institute is no different. Initiatives like your postdoctoral fellowship program and the cybersecurity training program have earned global recognition. At the same time, your focus on industry and academic collaboration, as well as your startup support, is strengthening Ontario's talent pipeline, driving commercialization, and solving real-world challenges. That's why since 2018, our government has invested over $17 million in the Fields Institute, ensuring this incredible place of innovation can continue to carry out world-class research. Our government will always support Made in Ontario innovation because we know an investment in research is an investment to protect Ontario. And since 2018, we've invested more than $2 billion to protect Ontario with groundbreaking homegrown research like what has been done here at the Fields Institute. In closing, I want to thank the incredible team at the Fields Institute for all the work you do to advance mathematics research and develop Ontario's research talent. And once again, to Dr. Braverman, congratulations on this well-deserved honor. And thank you for inspiring the next generation of innovators to pursue bold ideas and make our discoveries that will take our province, our country, and our world to new heights. I would now like to welcome Dr. Melanie Wooden, President of the University of Toronto, to the podium.
Good evening, everyone, and thank you so much to the Minister for joining us this evening and for his province's deep commitment to higher education and research in Ontario. I also want to take the opportunity to thank Professor Deirdre Haskell for inviting me to give some remarks to you this evening, and also to take this opportunity to congratulate you on your appointment as director last December. The University of Toronto, and I know the other universities, really look forward to deepening our engagement with the Institute under your leadership. It is a real privilege for me to be here to recognize Dr. Mark Braverman, the 2022 Abacus Prize winner, esteemed faculty member at Princeton, our speaker tonight, and a proud graduate of the University of Toronto. In celebrating Dr. Braverman's work, the Fields Institute is drawing a bright line between theoretical computer science and mathematical research. As Professor Haskell was just sharing with us, Dr. Braverman's research connects deep mathematical ideas with concepts in computer science like information, communication, computation, and algorithmic efficiency. And his work has far-reaching influence across many fields, not least machine learning and artificial intelligence. And so to me, this makes it especially fitting that Dr. Braverman is delivering today's public lecture at the Fields Institute in Toronto, because we are home, the academic home, to Jeff Hinton and his pioneering work. And so in that way, we are really this birthplace of artificial intelligence. But as I like to remind people, we don't just see ourselves here as the birthplace of deep learning and a home to artificial intelligence. We also see ourselves as the future and how we can use artificial intelligence in responsible ways to advance our mission within universities and research, innovation, teaching, and learning. And the Fields Institute is a fantastic partner in this. The newly announced Fields Institute Center for Mathematical AI, which is a collaboration amongst researchers here at the Fields Institute, together with the Vector Institute, the University of Toronto, and the other member universities Fields, are going to build on the Institute's long history of interdisciplinary collaboration and research excellence. Turning back now to this evening's lecture, let me say how thrilled I am that it is open as a public event. And we really hope that today's evening, whatever your disciplinary background is, sort of invokes a spark of curiosity for you and a sense of amazement, and that this lecture really challenges you to think and reflect. Certainly in engaging and inspiring the broader community is a mission of universities, and so we're thrilled to be delivering this. And I understand that it's not just that we can admire Dr. Braverman's ideas and discoveries, but we can learn from his spirit of inquiry, discovery, and wonder that really animate him and the entire academic community. In a recent interview, Dr. Braverman described winning the Abacus Prize as a responsibility. It makes you an ambassador, he said. Well, let me simply say it is a pleasure to welcome you back to the University of Toronto. We are grateful for your extraordinary and inspiring contributions to mathematics and your deep commitment to sharing those discoveries and contributions more broadly as you are doing tonight. And with that, I will bring my remarks to a close, and I wish everyone a wonderful evening.
Thank you very much, President Wooden, and also Minister Quinn. And I'm so pleased that you are able to spend a little bit of time with us this evening amidst all the many other demands on your time. So I'd like also, whoops. Just a we have a couple more dignitaries who were not able to be with us in person this evening, and so we'll listen to those in just a moment. But as I do so, I'd also like to especially remember that the research that we do here is possible because of the support that we receive from the province of Ontario, from NSERC, and from our network of sponsoring universities and affiliated universities. And I'd especially like to thank Professors George Elliott and Narika Yui, who have given contributions to the Fields Medal Symposium regularly, to Elsevier and to Jane Street, who've helped make this event possible. So now let's hear from two more dignitaries who could not be with us.
Hello, everybody. This is Hiraku Nakajima, the President of International Mathematical Union, IMU. It is a great honor for me to give a speech at the Fields Medal Symposium. As the President of the IMU, I'm also the chair of the Fields Medal Committee. Last year, I called the recommendation of the candidate. Then I asked experts for opinions on candidates' works. Together with committee members, I studied them carefully. Although I and the committee member will have responsibility of the choice of recipients, I'm thinking of this as a collaborative work of the mathematical community. I thank all those who help us for this discussion. I also thank the Fields Institute for organizing Fields Medal Symposium every year. This event spreads awareness medalist works in the community. It will be indispensable for help the work of committee in future. This year, Fields Medal Symposium features Professor Mark Braverman, 2022 IMU Abacus Medal winner. The Abacus Medal is a continuation of the Rolf Nevalina Prize awarded from 1982 to 2018. It is awarded for outstanding contribution in mathematical aspects of information sciences, including computer sciences, scientific computing, and numerical analysis. It is awarded to the single person, not 4 person, at each ICM. Otherwise, it is similar to Fields Medal. It is awarded to a researcher who is less than 40 years old. The choice of medalist is decided by Abacus Medal Committee. Committee calls the nomination and then asks experts for opinions on candidates' works. Thank you very much for your attention. I hope you enjoy Symposium and talks by various speakers, especially by Professor Braverman.
Hello, I'm Chris Eisgruber, the president of Princeton University. I am so glad to have the opportunity to connect today with the Fields Medal Symposium, where scholars and theorists from around the world gather to advance human knowledge and to inspire future generations of mathematicians. This year is the first time that the Fields Medal Symposium is honoring an Abacus Medal winner, and I am so pleased that you have chosen to celebrate the work of Princeton University Professor of Computer Science, Mark Braverman. As you know, the Abacus Medal is awarded once every 4 years at the International Congress of Mathematicians for outstanding contributions in mathematical aspects of information sciences. It focuses on talent under the age of 40 and is the successor to the Rolf Neven-Linna Prize, which was awarded from 1982 to 2018. The first Abacus Medal was awarded to Mark for his groundbreaking work on information complexity in 2022. Our modern, highly networked lives rely on something most people never think about: the communication protocols that allow far-flung computers to work together to compute answers to important questions. Mark's ingenious research speeds this process up dramatically by minimizing the amount of information that computers need to exchange in order to complete any given task. Mark's theoretical computer science work also has applications across a broad range of disciplines, from economics to electrical engineering, helping to continue to push computer science into new frontiers. At Princeton, Mark is known as a fearless problem solver. Indeed, that is how his colleague, the mathematician Asaf Noor, described him to Quanta magazine when Mark won the Abacus Award in 2022. Always bringing new perspectives to difficult problems, Mark has solved several significant mathematical problems during his career. Mark is also a vital member of the faculty community on campus, having joined Princeton's Department of Computer Science in 2011. He encourages his students to expand their thinking across disciplinary boundaries as he teaches the next generation of computer scientists how to see the connections between information theory, mathematical analysis, economics, and modern computing. Mark, we are inspired by your accomplishments and grateful for your scholarly contributions. Congratulations on this tremendous recognition.
Well, thank you to those people for recording videos for us, and I hope that based on all that, you will all go home tonight and tell your children what the Abacus Medal is and mention for the reasons why Mark Braverman won the award. So, following on from that, now we get to welcome Mark himself, who's going to tell us about the question, how do we measure surprise?
Thanks a lot. Thanks, Deidre and the crew for organizing the event and inviting me. And it's been a lot of work planning and organizing it, most of it by the Fields crew, and also for the scientific organizers, Shubangi, Matt, and Dor, who is not here yet. I'll give a brief talk about some math. So we'll talk about how to measure surprise. And also, as always, it's wonderful to be back in Toronto. I learned a lot here as a PhD student. It's a wonderful place to be a graduate student. I also spent a year here on the faculty, and it's always wonderful to be back and to be back in Toronto, to be back at the university, to see colleagues, and thank you for hosting me. So I'll talk about surprise. So if you get bored, here's a riddle. that you can think about. So there are 10 prisoners standing in a circle. Someone put a hat on each one of them, either a black hat or a white hat, at random. They see all the hats except for their own, and they need to guess the color of their own hat. And if they all guess their own hat correctly, they go free. Otherwise, they get executed. The question is, obviously, they can just guess, but that sounds pretty bad. They need to get really, really, really lucky. So that would be 1 in 2 to the 10 chance of, can they do better? Can they improve their chances of survival? We'll get back to it at the very end, but if you get bored, you can, and you haven't seen this riddle before, you can think about it. Okay, so surprise, obviously we have some colloquial understanding of what surprise is, but we can, okay, so what would be more surprising, if it rains tomorrow or if it snows tomorrow? I mean, in some sense, we understand since it's September and that it would be much more surprising if it snows. It's more impressive if I pretended to be a mentalist, if I managed to guess a number from 1 to 1,000, then a number from 1 to 64. And okay, so how do we quantify surprise? That's the topic. And before we talk about that, we'll need a detour into Shannon's theory of entropy, which was introduced, actually. It was invented to build a very successful and, I mean, dare I say, complete theory of data transmission. I mean, obviously, there are always more practical questions and extensions, but to the first order, it's been solved. And what it does, it measures the amount of bits, of zeros and ones. This is all kind of logical communication is made of, that are needed to transmit a message. So formally, and since it's a math talk, it needs one equation. So this is the equation. It doesn't, if you haven't seen it before, it doesn't matter what the equation is, but there is a formula. It basically, and it includes an element of surprise in it, but we won't actually need to know what it is, just to know that it exists. And it solves communication, so if you've seen it before, then that this is not news. If you haven't seen this theory before, it's like the concept of volume, but for communication. So what does the concept of volume do for us? Well, say we have this jar and we have this round jug and we want to pour juice into it and we want to know will it fit or not. Or how many jars will it take before we run out of juice? So it's 2, 3, or more. So volume, what it does, it reduces the problem to a single number, right? Which we shouldn't take for granted. So all I need to know is the amount of juice in liters, the volume of a jar in liters, and I just divide. So it boils down to a single number. And Shannon's information theory does the same thing. It assigns a number to all communication problems, something called entropy, which we wrote a formula for. It assigns something corresponding to a volume to transmission devices. It's called capacity, channel capacity. And you can do it just as you can answer all will it fit problems by just comparing volumes. You can compare, if you have enough capacity, then with enough modulo computation, you're good. You'll be able to solve the problem. So if you need to know how many those, I mean, if you are over 40, you know what this is. How many floppy disks you need to fit Harry Potter on it, you just compare two numbers or divide. You figure out the capacity of a floppy disk. You figure out kind of the entropy of the book. And that gives you the answer. And OK, so it's easy to take this for granted, but it's actually a miracle that people, I mean, communication, the telegraph was invented in the mid-19th century. Our militaries across the world used advanced fancy radio communication through even in World War I and World War II. So it wasn't obvious that you should expect this from information. So it's actually, People thought that it's a zoo of problems, like the zoo of problems we have for algorithms, and that each of them warrants a different solution. So what would happen if you took a wrong intellectual turn and decided to measure volume in oranges instead of liters? So you could take your jar and see how many oranges fit in it and call this the orange volume. So the first thing that would happen, you'll realize that actually figuring out volumes is easy, but figuring out volumes in oranges is very, very hard. So just the problem of how many oranges can you fit in a giant container, this is known as Kepler's problem. It was open for 400 years. We now have a computer-assisted proofs. We still don't, as far as I know, we don't have a simple explanation for why this is the best way to pack oranges. So that would be very, very hard, way harder than computing volume, something that we could do for thousands of years. Issue number 2, let's say you worked so hard, you're proud of yourself, but now you need to know how many grapefruits you can fit. So you're back to square one, and okay, grapefruits, at least they're just bigger spheres, but what about squashes or some odd? So if we wanted to fit squash puree, it would be easy, right? So we would just compute volumes. So it's actually a miracle. And it's a miracle that keeps giving. It behaves. It has other nice properties that are like volume. It's non-negative. Volume's entropy 0 corresponds to having full certainty. It's sub-additive. So when I add two containers, if they don't overlap, the volume adds up. Otherwise, if there is an overlap, it's less than. It behaves the exact same way. And it gives us, actually, from those simple pieces, we get pretty elaborate formalism that allows us to solve many pretty complicated problems that we wouldn't expect to solve otherwise. These are just fancy formulas from various papers that I copied. So just to summarize, Shannon's entropy gives us a handle on, so the definition in words is how many zeros and ones do I need to describe X? And so the basic unit, think about a random coin toss, it requires 1, 0, or 1. You can say 0 if it's tails, 1 if it's heads. 17 coin tosses would produce a sequence of 17 zeros and ones. English text, it's very much up to debate and definitions, but it's actually surprisingly low. It's something like 4 to 6 bits. It means that every next talk, of course, now we have LLMs are all about predicting English text, but it doesn't immediately translate into a good handle on this, but nonetheless, it's meaningful to talk about it. Okay, so let's go back to surprise. So this is an AI-generated picture of it snowing in September, and people seem pretty surprised. So how can we think about this? So one way to think about it, it might not be the most intuitive, but it unifies kind of communication with surprise in the sense of low probability. Let's try to sample, imagine, so it's only meaningful to talk about surprise if you don't know the future, right? If I told you, for some reason, I'm sure it's going to snow tomorrow, and you believed me, that wouldn't be surprising anymore. So one way to think about it is let's produce samples of weather tomorrow, or weather on September 24th. So one sample might be sunny, cloudy, sunny, rainy, and so on. It would take a very long time until we see snow. Eventually, we probably will see, because eventually anything happens, but let's say it takes 1901 tries. So surprise, actually, in a very formal sense that, just believe me, it can be thought of as the number of bits needed to choose the universe in which this happens. So to describe this number. So rain happened almost immediately. It's only took me 3 bits of surprise, let's say, because it's 100 in binary. But snow takes a long, it's a big number. It takes a long time to write, so it's produced 11 bits of surprise. And actually, this, for example, tells us that snow is about as surprising as having rain on this date 4 years in a row, because 11 is about 4 times 3. So to summarize, Shannon's entropy can be used to measure information content of a message. That's what it was invented for. It can also be used to measure luck. And many other things that we are not talking about, like device storage capacity. So let's see one example of this. So the 20 questions. I thought of a number between 1 and 64. Let's try to guess it. So I'll answer questions of more than or less than. Well, what's the first thing you ask? I mean, 32, good. So it's in the middle. It will eliminate half the possibilities, which is the best we can do. So it's more than 32. What's next? Well, it's 48. It's the middle point. So it's the hardest one, because then it gets easier again to find the midpoint, because the numbers get closer. So let's say it's not more than 48, so we eliminate all the numbers to the right of 48. The middle point now is 40. Let's say it's more than 40, 44, 46. It's not more than 46, but it's more than 45. So what's the number? It's 46. It's more than 45, but not more than 46. So we won in 6 bits of communication. We asked 6 questions. Or, OK, so what else could we do? Could we have guessed it faster? Well, sure. We could get lucky, right? We could guess it in one guess. We could just say the number and be correct, right, with some probability, with 1 in 64 chance. It's very impressive when it works. It doesn't work that often, but if it works, it's very impressive. So, and to do this, you need 6 bits of luck, in the sense that actually, if you were to calculate, that's what you would get. So they're actually interchangeable 1 for 1, which is kind of one way to see that they're made of the same thing. Or we could actually mix and match. Let's say we did the first 3 questions, and then we decided to stop. So now we know that we are between 41 and 48. Let's guess 46. OK, so she's not as mad because it doesn't require as much luck. So it's not obviously cheating. It's 1 in 8, which takes 3 bits. So 3 bits of communication followed by 3 bits of luck. OK, so that concludes this example. Let's go back to the poor prisoners. So how much luck do we need? And this is actually to explain why this example is the simplest example I know that explains why we have a complete theory of communication, but we have nowhere a complete theory of computation, because of stuff like this. So, which is fun for giving talks, but it's actually maddening if you're trying to prove something. So it looks like we need 10 bits of luck, right? Every one of them needs one of these clovers to not die, to just guess their own hat. But, so it's 1 in 1024, but actually we can make just one lucky guess instead. So we only need one lucky guess that, let's say we correctly guess that there is an even number of black hats. So it's one bit of luck. We guess correctly that there is an even number of black hats. And then each prisoner can do the math from there. So if you are a prisoner, I see 4 black hats. I know that there is an even number of black hats overall. So my hat is white. Some other prisoner sees only 3 black hats. So he knows that it's a black hat. So they actually can survive with probability half and not by just guessing correctly whether the number of black hats is even or odd. And so in computation, this stuff happens all the time. Recycling of luck, recycling of memory, that basically you can have a bit of communication, at least you can tell what it talks about. A bit in a computer storage can actually be used several times, can be overloaded. And yeah, so getting around these barriers is actually a very active area of research, motivated in part by envy. I don't think we'll ever have a complete theory of computation the way we have a complete theory of communication, but it shouldn't stop us from trying. And thank you.
Thank you very much, Mark. That was a very enjoyable talk indeed. We will have an opportunity for questions later on, so maybe I'll let us go on from there. And so the next item on our agenda is to have a panel discussion between Mark and Matt Weinberg, who is one of the co-organizers of the Fields Medal Symposium, Rotem Oshman of Tel Aviv University, who will be giving a talk later on in the symposium, and the Fields Institute Deputy Director, Patrick Ingram. So while they get the stage set up for the panel discussion, I would like to turn your attention back to the screen for one more video discussion from some surprise guests.
Hi, I'm Sumekha. I'm currently an assistant professor at Rutgers University. I feel extremely fortunate to have had Mark as my PhD advisor. When I first arrived at Princeton, I was trying very hard not to have the same advisor as my brother, but in our very first meeting itself, Mark introduced me to one of his favorite 9 problems, the notorious Linear conjecture for network coding. I immediately felt it was the most fascinating problem, and I knew from then onwards that I wanted to work with him. I believe this is an invariant in many problems Mark studies, that they are simple to state yet deeply elusive. Moreover, he adamantly works on these truly hard problems and uncovers remarkable insights in whatever research areas he touches. His research style has not only impacted the kind of questions I pursue, for example, bringing an information theoretic lens to various CS problems, but also how I approach them. And also over the years, I have been very fortunate to have his on-point guidance for other aspects of being an academic researcher as well. I'm very grateful for his constant support. Many congratulations, Mark. The Abacus Medal is so truly deserved.
Hi, Mark. It's Jiaming from Google Research. I'm so honored to have been your PhD student. When I heard you won the Abacus Medal, I was so happy. Huge congratulations. It's so well deserved. Thinking back to my time as your student, I remember countless times when I got stuck on a research problem and we discussed it in our meeting. After I explained where I was stuck, you'd enter that thinking mode. And before the meeting ended, you would always point me towards a new direction that with very high probability unblocked the problem. Sometimes you even solve the problem during the meeting. During that process, not only did we make progress on the research, but I also learned so much from you on various proof techniques and, more importantly, high-level thinking strategies to tackle these hard problems. Those lessons have stayed with me ever since, and they have fundamentally shaped how I approach challenges in both research and practical industrial problems today. I'm so thankful for your guidance. Congratulations again on this incredible and well-deserved honor.
Hi, we're some of Mark's current students, and we wanted to record this to say congratulations to Mark and to talk a little bit about how much he's impacted all of us. I've found Mark to be a really great advisor for my first 3 years in grad school, in large part because of how great his suggestions for research projects are. He's got an incredible grasp of the broader impact of theory research, and so he has great ideas for what to work on, but he is also willing to let all of us take those ideas in our own directions, and so I've had a wonderful time working with him on projects that have really been inspired by both of our interests, and so are better for it. He's been kind of perfectly supportive as a mentor in that sense.
So I think working with Mark has been a unique experience. Sometimes I find his words a little bit mysterious to understand, but as I gain deeper understanding of the subject, I always find them to be very insightful. So I want to thank Mark for always providing new perspectives on how to tackle a problem and provide the help that I need when I feel stuck.
For me, Mark has been a great role model and someone to aspire to as a researcher. He has always impressed me with the depth of his intuition on a diverse range of topics and his eagerness to expand to new fields and break new ground. He's also been an incredibly patient advisor who's always been willing to explain even the most basics of concepts to me, which I'm incredibly grateful for. And so once again, congratulations, Mark, on all your achievements, and from all of us, thank you for your support.
So it's rather lovely to have had the chance to hear from some of Mark's current and former students. And I remind you that tomorrow evening we have the student night, so an opportunity for students here in Toronto to come and talk to Mark as well. So now please come to the stage. We'll have Matt, Mark, Patrick, and Rotem for a panel discussion on the theme of roughly theoretical computer science and its relationship with mathematics through the lens of the work of Mark Braverman.
So thank you, Deirdre, for the introduction. And I'd like to thank Matt Weinberg from Princeton. Can everyone hear me? Is this functioning? Okay, good. Matt Weinberg from Princeton University and Rotem Oshman from Tel Aviv University for joining us on the panel. And I want to say a few things just about the format of the panel. So I'll ask some questions of the panelists, and we'll get some sort of general overview of the field, and then I'll ask for some questions from the audience. So if you have questions from the panel or from the talk or whatever, I'll try to reserve some time at the end. I have a lot of questions, but I'll try to get us out to the reception in time. And we'll try to sort of keep our answers to a general audience level. And the secret advantage we have is that I know nothing about theoretical computer science, so if you can explain it at my level, then everyone else is going to be absolutely fine. So I want to start with just sort of a soft question, which is about the Abacus Medal announcement, or when you found out that you received the Abacus Medal. So it was in 2022 that it was awarded to you, but maybe you could tell us a little bit about how you found out, what, the story around you learning that you'd won the Abacus Medal.
Sure. So, is this on? So, so it's, I got an email, they do it a few months in advance. I got an email from the president of the IMU that he wants to talk, which, I kind of got a sense because I can do a lot of business with the president of the IMU. So that's, and so then we Zoomed. I was at home anyway because we were on Zoom. I think we were doing admissions meeting. So we set up a time to talk pretty quickly, and he said that he feels like Santa Claus because I guess he had a few of those calls in a row with Fields Medal winners. And they had a tight embargo. They actually managed they usually manage to keep those things secret until the Congress.
So how long did you have to sort of keep this a secret from
about
friends and
5
colleagues?
Months. I told some students because I had to work on a paper, and there was a film crew with some strange story that they've been telling people. Because they wanted to. So they had some cover story. I felt they overdid it a little bit with the conspiracy, but they managed. They seem to be able, even in this connected age, to keep it tight. I don't know if it was.
Okay, great. And maybe I'll ask Matt. What was your reaction to learning that Mark had won the medal? And maybe do you remember when you found out?
Yeah, so, for what's worth, I don't remember if I saw the film crew or not, but I definitely didn't know until the public knew. So if the students found out, they didn't tell me, and it seemed pretty well kept. I remember thinking, like two kinds of things. One of them was just super excited because I'm also pretty good friends with Mark, and we work together, and so I was super excited about that. And part of me was also like, yeah, it makes sense. Like, I'm not surprised, and that's, as much as sort of something at that level can never be expected or not a surprise, it felt like it totally made sense, and was very excited for him. Yeah.
Okay, interesting. Rotem, I have a question about this sort of prize and recognition in general. So, the prize is announced, and there's a citation for, the prize is for research within a certain area or a certain set of problems within the discipline. Do you think that sort of drives grad students and future researchers to move in that direction, or do you think that has that sort of influence on the field?
So it's very hard to say because we cannot have a controlled, randomized experiment with a control arm, right? But I was recently co-chair of one of the major theoretical computer science conferences, and it seems pretty clear to me that there is increasing amount of submissions from the pure math or formerly pure math people that are now actually working on problems that rise out of computer science, but also have a very deep component. In some cases, even going back to conjectures that have been open for 200 years, and nobody knew why this conjecture could be relevant to things. And this motivation now comes out of computer science, and people come back and they actually solve the conjecture, which is really inspiring to see.
That's great. Okay. Matt, do you have any thoughts on this? Whether the sort of, maybe even with, outside of theoretical computer science, do you think this sort of prize draws more attention to research within?
Yeah, it's also like Rotem's like hard to tell whether it's the prize itself or the follow-up to the prize or the fact that we're having this workshop, and so for the mathematicians who choose to come, we get to tell them about theoretical computer science, and hopefully, I even talked to someone today who is a mathematician. I mentioned in my talk that I had a pure math problem, and he asked me about it, and so that was great, and so that starts some dialogues, and then now I'm probably going to, when I tell my friends and my family about this, I'll mention Mark's talk, which was pretty cool, and so that that stuff spreads, I think. But yeah, like Rotem, that's hard to attribute to exactly what part in the chain, but I definitely think so.
Okay, great. So both of you mentioned theoretical computer science, pure math. This sort of brings me to I sort of want to say a political question, academic political question, which is this prize is awarded by the IMU, the International Mathematical Union, and it's a prize in theoretical computer science. So that sort of gives the impression that theoretical computer science is an area of mathematics. That's, if we're looking at this from the outside, that might be how you look at it. On the other hand, I know that people make a big distinction between mathematics and computer science, and there's some feelings that the methodologies are very different, the cultures of the two disciplines are very different. President Wooden, during her comments, mentioned a bright line between mathematics and computer science. So my question for Mark maybe is can you explain that to me? Can you sort of draw the Venn diagram? I saw one of your slides had something that looked a little bit like a Venn diagram. Can you say where you sit on that Venn diagram?
It's okay. So those are different questions. How people define themselves, or how? I mean, I'm both. What it means. I mean, it's really a lot. As someone who works in many disciplines, including also economics, electrical engineering, you learn that mostly a lot of it is just about kind of how you write the introduction. And a lot of it is kind of superficial cultural attributes, especially what we don't like. So we don't like poorly stated conjectures if we are mathematicians, or we don't flaunt the fact that this is going to be useful for input sizes of 2 to the 500 in computer science, but we are proud of it in math. But it boils down to kind of not even internal taste, but how people represent them, and kind of what holidays they celebrate. And it's not, I don't know if the distinction is deep at the level of science. Of course, in terms of once you have unions and awards, it's good to have people who can talk to multiple disciplines, because it's part of the scientific enterprise.
Yeah, Matt, do you feel like you're both a mathematician and a computer scientist, or a mathematician because how to?
Yeah, I would also say a little bit of both, although I think I'm definitely probably much less of a mathematician than Mark, and I think probably less than Rotem too, but okay, we can fight about it later. But I would say that to me, I feel like when I feel more like a mathematician is when I'm working on a problem, and I feel like the primary thing that gets me going is this is just aesthetically beautiful, and I think people should know about this because it feels fundamental in some way, and I can't necessarily draw a line to like where would this be applied in the future, but like that's the primary feeling I have. And I think that plays a role in computer science too, especially theoretical computer science, and sometimes I feel But some of the research I do is less like that, and I actually can draw a line to where is this going to be used in the future. I don't want to say that's not what math is for, but I feel more like a computer scientist when I try to draw that line, and more like a mathematician when I'm just like so blown away with how excited I am about the feeling I get.
Okay, Rotem, it sounded like maybe there was an invitation for a fight or a
All right. I wanted to explain what Mark said about the introduction, right? So here's what a math paper looks like. In terms of the introduction, we define the following object and we prove the following statements about it. But theoretical computer science will start by saying, well, a wireless network is a collection of wireless robots. Blah, blah, blah. We define the following object and we prove the following statements about it. So at the heart of it, a lot of times it is really the same thing. And like Matt said, it is driven by some notion of beauty or something that is true that you really want everybody to know is true because it's surprising or essential somehow. But typically in computer science, you're going to need to find some justification for that, or it actually came out of some realistic application. So that is maybe the only difference.
Okay, well that really leads to my next question, which I think I'll start with Mark, but again, this is a question for all of you, which is to what extent is your work motivated by practical problems versus theoretical exploration? And what I mean by that is, looking at the talks earlier today and looking at some of your papers, Mark, I can see that both things play a role, but do you sort of think of it more as you have a practical problem and you think, okay, how am I going to build a theory to solve this? Or are you sort of building a theory and extending a theory and then looking around and seeing, where can I make use of this?
I suppose there are two dimensions to this question. So one dimension is, are you trying to build something or are you trying to understand something? So, right, so it could be something very useful, but I mean, how to raise more funding for your projects, for example. But there is still something very, very applied, but there is the matter of doing it versus the matter of understanding it. So that's one dimension. And and the other dimension is, are you trying to understand something useful or are you trying to understand something abstract, right? So I would say I definitely want to understand things. It's kind of, if you're an academic, that's what we are for in some sense. It's a place where we get the opportunity to try to understand things. But the range of things, I don't think I have a preference between something that's very applied, like economic questions or specific practical questions about communication, or something very abstract, like mathematical theories of various things that are just, we need to know for the sake of beauty and edification.
Rotem, are you driven more by the applications or the theory and then finding the applications?
Both. I think for most people it would be both. So I think maybe I am together with Matt on the more practically motivated side. My main research is in distributed computing, and the things that I do tend to arise out of that in some sense. But they can go pretty far in terms of applications. For example, when you prove a lower bound, that's an impossibility result. That is not going to have an application, the fact that you can't do something. But you still want to know, you still want to have the proof of it, and especially to understand why that is true, and then in what other cases maybe it's not true. So it's a kind of a back and forth between the motivation, the theory. It sometimes comes back to the motivation, kind of a back and forth.
Okay, great. And Matt, so on the one hand, Rotem is saying maybe you're sort of more applied. On the other hand, you mentioned the beauty of the theory and trying to understand it and share that with other people. So what sort of which is the horse and which is the cart for you?
Yeah, so maybe first I would say I take maybe a broad view on what's applicable. And so I would say for me, some of the research I do is closely tied to an application in the sense that I see a problem, I want to solve the problem, and that's what motivates me. And some of the research, like I said, is because I got so deep in a problem, and I feel like it's so beautiful and stuff like that, that I want to keep going. But even then, I feel like I would take a very broad view and say, like, I really think that if those ideas get out there, they are good ideas, and good ideas have downstream impact, and that's why we do foundational research, even if we don't know sort of like exactly where it's going to fit in. And I would even say, like, for lower bounds, they're like applicable because, you know, you learn about what's not going to work, and later, you know, if those ideas get out there, people stop trying the same ideas that aren't going to work. And so, like, I agree, it's hard to call it applied when you're talking to, like, you know, someone who works in applied machine learning and say that, like, my lower bounds are as applied as your system you built. That, like, that's not a fair comparison. But I don't think that what we do is, like, application free in some sense. That, like, I really believe that a lot of the aesthetics of pure math are because they eventually make better problem solvers and put better structure on problems, and it's good for applications to have that way of thinking out there.
Yeah, it certainly seems like something like a lower bound or a non-existence result would give you, you know, you're not going to use that to then build something that will be sold at Best Buy, but it gives you some limits on you know, where you can explore in the future and what other progress you can make. So Rotem, my understanding is your research is more related to the sort of computational complexity stuff mentioned in the prize citation. Sometimes in a research area, sort of big breakthroughs can reduce a field to some extent, right? If everyone's sort of working on some big problem in some area and then someone solves the problem, you might think, okay, we all go home. We're all sort of done. But of course, we also know that sometimes big breakthroughs open things up, right? Because more questions get opened up from the development than get closed down. So what do you think the impact on your area of Mark's work has been? And do you think there's sort of everything's been answered, or do you think there's more to do? Where do you see the field going in the future?
So the impact of Mark's work, it's, I hope I'm not embarrassing you too much, but look away for
That's
a
okay.
second.
You can, it's all about embarrassment.
I personally wouldn't have gone into this area if it wasn't for Mark's work, because I certainly didn't have the right background for it. And the difference that information complexity makes, at least for me, is that there had been quite a few techniques in the past to do the things that information complexity can do, not as well, but very importantly for me, in a way that I don't understand. Information complexity lets you put down a proof that you can first explain in words. This bit needs to talk about that, and you have to tell me this. And if you didn't say this to me, I won't be able to solve the problem because I don't know that. And that is priceless to me. And I feel like this way of thinking also opened up a lot of problems that just weren't there before, that we didn't know that we could think about. So both things that you were asking about have happened. Some of Mark's work is on compression of interactive protocols. We have a very good understanding now, some huge open problems remaining, but that line of research seems to have kind of drawn back a little bit because we've understood a lot of things. On the other hand, you see now so many new both communication protocols and applications and lower bounds in other areas, and so many of them are using information complexity because it's become feasible, explainable, doable, and this is Mark's contribution. I'm finished.
Well,
that's great.
Obviously, if you're so good, you can make it work. Then it looks easy.
All right. Well, we'll take a break from embarrassing Mark for a moment. So again, the prize citation mentions in particular your work on information theory, and you mentioned in your talk Claude Shannon, and the prize citation also mentions Claude Shannon. But I sort of noted that this was, Claude Shannon was working in the 30s and 40s, and there's sort of a long period in between. Were there other big influences on you that led to your research in this area in between, or was there sort of a period there where not much?
Of course, work was being done all the time. First of all, there was my colleague Anup Rao who introduced me to all these problems. So that was a big influence. I mean,
I just graduated and I was looking for things to look at. And a lot of it, so the components, the same concepts actually had been discovered independently by several fields. So actually, even within computer science, the very same definitions were written down by cryptographers in the 1990s because they were concerned with understanding, okay, we are going to try to solve something, I want to leak no information, and they wanted to know if it's possible or not. It's a completely different application, but it's actually native to them to speak in this language. So it's, for me, the biggest influence was just my colleagues who kind of, so Anup and other colleagues who worked on those problems who kind of asked the questions more so than, it was more of a framing and kind of staying persistent in terms of, okay, we are going to define write down the right definitions, we're going to make them work together. The ideas were there actually, it's almost not an advantage anymore because if it's like everyone in math wants to be the first. And it's not, if it's been done several times, it's almost not an advantage, but it's definitely a lot of groundwork, a lot of, even in this specific sub-area, a lot of the techniques existed for a long time. So of course, the goal is, my contributions in terms of actual proofs were relatively minor, but the goal is to frame it and to kind of build components that you can explain and build upon.
Okay, so I feel like I got a little more humility in that answer than if I had asked one of your colleagues. So I'm going to ask maybe another question. So I've been talking about the scientific work that was mentioned in the prize citation in particular, but as I sort of looked at your research, there's a lot of other topics that you worked on, and in particular, a lot of work in the overlap of econ and CS and game theory, other topics as well. So I wanted to ask both Matt and Rotem, if there's one contribution in maybe one of these other areas that's really one contribution of Mark's that's really exciting to you or had a big impact that sort of stands out from the other ones. Maybe we'll start with Matt.
Sure. Yeah, so one direction that I think Mark was one of the first researchers in econ CS to start working on and that has really taken off was understanding the interplay between learning and econ/incentives/strategies and stuff like that. So yes, this is an area where we've worked together, but outside of our joint work, he has one paper joined with an economist that looks at sort of like, say in like the healthcare industry, maybe, like there's maybe some concern that if you're getting subsidies based on who you cover, it's really good if you can cover healthy people because they don't cost anything, you get paid the same. And then you can take that to another level and say, what if there's some learning going on and you get subsidies not just based on that you cover someone, you get subsidies based on some of their traits. And then you say, oh, okay, so that's going to solve the problem because now people who are more likely to be sick you're going to get paid more, and if they're less likely to be sick, you're going to get paid less. But then kind of like what, hopefully I'm summarizing the paper accurately. It's kind of awkward to do that in front of the author, but one of the things you can observe from there is like, well, but then it just changes the game, right? You want to find people who are misclassified by whatever the classifier is. It says, oh, here's someone who the classifier thinks is likely to be expensive, but I know they're not that expensive, so that's who I want to cover, and I don't want to cover the people who are misclassified the other direction. And so I think like that way of thinking, when Mark had started working on these problems, was not common, and so I think that it's fair to give his research some credit for like making that way of thinking mainstream, and it's definitely at this point like a very active area in econ CS, and I think even the best paper award at the most recent top conference for econ CS was one of the co-authors was one of Mark's former students who started working on questions like these when he was with Mark. So I think that's maybe what I would say is one of the things that excites me most.
Okay, great. Rotem, do you have a other development that is particularly exciting to you?
I think I wouldn't cite a specific development here, but more about kind of the way that Mark has more than once in the time I've known him kind of, you think you understand something and you think you are working on a problem and you know what the problem is and you know what you should be doing. And then Mark comes in and kind of pulls the rug from underneath you. And all of a sudden things become doable that weren't doable before. This is not only in computer science and math. We had a conversation when Mark and Anna were selling their house about what is the correct incentive structure for realtors, right? And this is not a question that a lot of people think about. But this was a super insightful thing, and I still think about it occasionally. I was thinking about when I bought my own apartment. Unfortunately, nobody has put this incentive structure in place. But it's just an example of how this kind of out-of-the-box thinking can go to a lot of different places.
Yeah, so that kind of brings me, both of those answers kind of bring me to my next question, which in fact kind of came up when I was watching Matt's talk this morning and auctions were mentioned. And my sort of naive, again, as I said at the beginning, I don't know very much about theoretical computer science, probably nothing. But if I think of a canonical problem in theoretical computer science, I think of something like sorting a list of numbers. So you have n numbers in a list, and you have one algorithm that can sort it in like O of n log n, and one that can do it in O of n squared. One, I think they can do an O of n, maybe. There's different, no? Okay.
I'm covering this in class. I had somebody substitute for me today.
Is there a Zoom
cannot
link?
do it.
Is there a Zoom? Okay, well, so this is just, I only did this to reinforce the impression that I had no knowledge of computer science. But one of the things that I do strongly suspect is that the list doesn't look at what algorithm you're using and then kind of tweak itself to change how it's sorted. Whereas in an auction, that is something you would do, or in a voting system if you're a political party, you would take the voting system into account when you plan your sort of campaign strategy. So I guess a question for Mark I have is this sort of self-referentiality, is this sort of fundamental, does this make these sorts of problems fundamentally different from sort of algorithms for more classical problems, or is it sort of incidental to the
No,
question?
absolutely. It's also, now that algorithms are kind of widespread and spreading more, it's gonna be a defining feature of so we've solved most technological problems. This is gonna be the defining feature of what's hard. So if you think about it, it's infinitely easier to access Sanskrit poetry than it was 30 years ago before the internet, but it's not much easier to find a good plumber using the internet. And that's game theory in action. It's not this is not an arcane principle. This is the result. In terms of search, of course, you list what you're searching for, you have a database in the back and you bring the data forward, but obviously one is very different from the other because a game is being played on the other end.
So this is why I'm having trouble finding a plumber right now, which is something, it's not an emergency, but I am looking for a plumber, and this is not taking this into account. So here's maybe a question for all of you, and I'll start with Mark and then move through. What advice would you give to a student hoping to sort of make a major breakthrough in theoretical computer science? Is that something that you can sort of guide or sort of work towards, or how much of that is sort of circumstance and luck? What one piece of advice would you give to a student who's sort of hoping to make a big impact in theoretical computer science?
That's a weird goal, honestly. Okay, so
what's a better goal?
No, I guess I would ask, the first question would be why is this your goal? And either kind of convince them to do something else, or actually use their answer to, okay, so if that's what you're passionate about, okay, go make it work, right? So it's either you want riches and fame, which is a lousy way to get there, so find, if with the same drive you could probably do better, or if you're specifically interested in, understanding something and you would do it anyway, then okay, go do it. But this is the first question I would guess to ask.
Okay. Rotem, do you have a?
I'm equally stumped by the question. I think mostly the advice I find myself giving a lot to my students is it's not a straight line. You don't know in advance the path that you're going to follow. A lot of times it zigzags or it even looks like a random walk. But from every stop that you make along the way, you learn something and you pick something up, and you can then apply that.
Matt, do you?
Yeah, I'll give 2 answers. So one, I would say go work with Mark, because that worked for me. And second one I would say is similar to Mark's. So I definitely would talk with them and I'd say, what do you mean your goal is to like do something big? So like, what do you mean by that? And like, why exactly did you phrase it that way? And I think like Mark would have a conversation with them, and I think eventually where I would maybe try and get them to is sort of like, look, because like you kind of hinted at, this is, there's, you know, even no matter how smart and how good you are, there's some circumstance involved in things working out right. And so kind of like all you can do, you can, I would say, stay super curious and be curious and intense about everything you see, and then like work really hard on the stuff that makes you passionate. And that's kind of like all you can do. And I can't promise that that's gonna result in like some big breakthrough or getting the job you want or getting an award you want. But that's kind of like all you can do. And if you love that, then you have to learn to be happy with whatever outcomes ultimately arise. And honestly, that's the best advice I can give. Even if you told me I'm not that zen, I need to have this job and this award, I would say that's the best advice I can give anyway. So try to get happy with that.
So maybe the best route to the extrinsic reward is the intrinsic motivation.
That's at least how I feel and what I try and share, yeah.
Okay, okay. I actually wanted to, I was sort of a little bit inspired by something that was on one of your slides, Mark, with the stack of oranges. And in particular, the Kepler's problem and the computer-aided proof of Kepler's problem. And last week, I was in the Netherlands and I saw a demonstration of this new AlphaGo software from Google, where you just, you know, you put in your lemmas and it thinks about it for a second and it gives you proofs of your lemmas, and you go home because, you know, there's nothing left to do in mathematics. Now, we left it a little unknown whether you were doing mathematics or computer science or where exactly you were in the Venn diagram, but you were certainly proving theorems and proving lemmas. As a theoretical computer scientist, do you have an impression about sort of the idea of AI doing mathematics, doing the proofs? Do you think it's possible? Do you think it's desirable? Do you have any ideas there? Yeah, I'll start with you.
Sure. I mean, it's obvious that it's going to happen to some extent, that we're going to have automated theorem provers. It's already kind of priced into existing technology. Okay, so then there are unknowns in terms of how far it will be able to go. That we don't have a good handle on. Also, we don't know, we have never tried to do mathematics without a map. So putting kind of proving lemmas, that would be convenient. Whether we might stop, I mentioned it in my talk, I'm not sure I accept this as a proof in the sense that I don't know why stacking oranges like this is the best way. I mean, to me, as a mathematician, it's slightly more comforting to know that there is a theorem that says so. As a computer scientist, and as a person, it's not helpful. So in terms of what would be useful for us, so if the goal is to understand things in terms of drawing those maps, we'll find out whether kind of, let's say you write a lemma, it tells you if it's true or false. How is it like 10% of the problem or 90% of the problem? Of course, now we are sitting stuck in the office, and especially students who are stuck writing those lemmas, it feels like 90%. We might either discover or kind of convince ourselves that it's 10% of the problem, just as, you know, getting places, the car is driving, but you think you are doing the work, even though the horsepowers are coming from the engine. So we'll find out. Some of it is happening, it's priced in.
Okay. Okay, Matt, do you have an impression of what might happen, or do you have a sense of what's possible, whether we're looking at a new kind of calculator or just, you know, everyone go home, math is done?
Yeah, I have no idea. So I definitely have spent some time playing around with them, just like as I would say, like anyone, I think teaching a course has to at least play around with the free versions of stuff to understand like what's going to happen if you copy paste your assignment, you know, into free AI and just copy paste the answer. And I've been simultaneously very impressed and very unimpressed, like kind of at the same time. And basically everything I've seen, I can't make a mental model for it. That like sometimes I'll be very impressed that like, oh my gosh, that problem, I thought it was very clever coming up with it. I didn't think it was similar to other stuff on the internet, and it solves. Other times I come up with a problem, I think it's kind of easy, and it like totally botches it, and I have no mental model because I can't think of humans that would behave like that, and so I don't know how to map it onto what's going to happen in the future. Maybe the thing I'll say, like you also asked about sort of like how we feel about AI possibly solving a bunch of stuff that we used to do by hand, and I feel kind of like both. I feel some positive, some negative. I would say things I feel positive about are that certainly I think the stuff we do is very important, and so like having help doing more stuff is kind of like only a positive. The thing I would say maybe I'm wary of is, like I was saying before, I think having good fundamental problem-solving ability is still super important for ideas that come downstream. And I do think we all develop really good problem-solving ability by working on these problems that we do by hand. And so I don't know what will happen if we all stop doing that and rely on AI for some of the things we do by hand now, how that will affect kind of our downstream problem-solving ability. And so I would say I'm wary and curious about how that will go.
Yeah, I think that's an interesting question. And you can think about implications of previous technology and the way that that's affected our sort of abilities and also augmented at the same time. Rotem, earlier when we were talking and I mentioned the title of this workshop I was at last week, which was Mechanization of Mathematics, I had a sense that you were not in favor of the idea of mechanizing mathematics. Do you have a sense of?
Only because I was loudly saying, "Oh no."
Yeah, I picked up on it. Do you have a sense of? There's two questions, right? There's what is possible and what is desirable. Do you have answers to one or both of those?
I think I'm really with Matt in the sense that we might be losing a skill that is more than just writing in cursive or something like that. And I think I'm seeing it already in my current students. They're less willing to sit down with a problem and wrestle with it until it submits. The threshold for them to go and ask ChatGPT seems to be getting lower and lower. It's hard to say what exactly, some of it could just be effects of the pandemic. It's very hard to disentangle the causes right now. But this is definitely something I'm worried about, not just for math and problem solving, but also for just communication, writing, talking. And as for what might be possible, the thing that I'm actually most looking forward to is the verification side of things. That really feels within reach, that you could just take your paper that you wrote, maybe, and feed it into a theorem prover that would just verify it, but you would skip what today can take a PhD student 5 years, which is to sit down and translate this proof into the language of the theorem prover, and all the missing details have to be filled in and so on to actually get a proof. Making that part work really feels like it should be within reach, and that would be super helpful.
Yeah, so this is sort of the auto-formalization component of trying to use AI to translate natural language math into something that can be checked by a computer. And certainly I was talking to people last week at this workshop, and people who referee a lot of papers were very excited about this idea of just feeding them into the machine and finding out whether they're right or wrong. All right, thank you very much. So I want to make sure that we get to the reception, but I also wanted to open up the floor to questions from the audience. I think for now, maybe we'll ask for questions from the in-person audience, but we can also open it up maybe later if someone on Zoom wants to ask a question. And so Brian, are you gonna hand out the microphone? So maybe we'll start over here.
Oh, wow, that's the first question. I apologize for this question. I was trying to take home what the definition of a surprise is. And I gather from your view, it's a new entropy measurement of something that wasn't explained. And the reason I ask this question, one of my wicked hobbies is watching people figure out a joke. And to alleviate the stress, the joke is why is a joke and sex alike? And I won't wait to watch people figure it out, but the answer is, if you don't get it, you miss out. And I was wondering if you could just elaborate a bit more on the definition of a surprise. Thank you.
So I guess the raw definition is of how, in terms of entropy, how much less entropy do you have after you learn that you are in that state? That would be one definition of. So it's more surprising if after you learn it, there is less surprise left in the world. There is a way to put it in formulas, but so that's probably the more official definition. The less official is what I put in the talk. How much would it take you to describe the state you end up with? So it's more surprising if it takes more to explain. So that's so the more it takes to explain something, the more surprising it is, because it's easy to explain things that are common, but it will take longer to explain things that are uncommon, basically.
Like a Geiger counter, could we have a surprise meter?
It's a bit more challenging because you need to agree on common reality for that. So that's one, right? So it could be surprising, right? So it could be surprising for someone. It's maybe the punchline of this joke is not surprising for you, but it's surprising for me because I don't have a sense of humor. So, so it depends on. So it's viewpoint dependent, unfortunately, but basically you could, if you had a common reality.
But there is an axiomatic definition of surprise. The surprise from an event that occurs is a number. And you want it to satisfy that if the probability of one event is smaller than of another event, then your surprise from the first is greater than from the second. And the surprise from an event is 0 only if this event is deterministic. It never happens, or it always happens. And then the last axiom is that if 2 events are independent, then the surprise from both of them occurring should be additive. And from that, you can derive the formulas that Mark was showing.
Huh. All right, I think we had another question, Jordana?
Hi, so you can't just say that Mark came up with an incentive structure for what real estate agents value and then not tell us what the incentive structure for what real estate value is. Can you please tell us?
So the usual incentive structure is that they just get a percentage of the sale. And Mark was saying, I don't want that because there is a certain price that I can get by myself. You don't need to do anything to get this price for the house, right? But beyond that price, that's what you need the realtor for. So the incentive structure was right to get a percentage for this above Mark's ability to sell the house gap. But only that part.
But a much higher percentage. So it's, yeah.
Thank you.
So I think I've seen data that real estate agents keep their own houses on the market longer than their clients' houses on average, something like 2 weeks longer on average. So that gives you some indication that maybe the incentive structure is not optimal. Do we have another question here for the panelists? Either from the panel or from the talks? I think everyone's excited about the reception, but I will quickly ask if there's anyone online who has a question. Maybe you can indicate. Oh, all right. Is there any chance you could unmute and ask your question? Or otherwise I can read it. I will read the question, but I'll have to move closer. Okay. If the notion of surprise is incorporated into the research in mathematics, can it be used as a measure of importance of new results? Namely, is a more surprising result equivalent to a more important result? So I think this is actually a really interesting question, especially when we come to the idea of AI doing mathematics. How does it know that the mathematics it's done is going to be of interest? Can you quantify the importance of a theorem by some sort of measure of surprise? Do you think that's possible, Mark?
That's an interesting idea. It's obviously you need something else because it could be very surprising and very unimportant. Or it's surprising because nobody thought about it. But nobody literally thought about it, not in a good way.
Like nobody asked.
Nobody asked, so it's very surprising that someone answered, right? So you could literally never come up with this. So in some sense, it's the best results are both kind of shocking and unsurprising, I guess, in a way that we really wanted to know, but it's something that we expected to hear about. So it's probably a mix of both. It might be possible to write a formula, but that uses concept from information, but it's never thought about it.
Matt, do you have anything to add to the?
Yeah, I think I would mostly, I mean, this is again like a very deep question on the spot, but I think I generally agree with Mark that like, in general, probably more surprising is better, generally. But there are other dimensions, and I think the main one, like Mark said, is sort of like importance. So like maybe you could try and say the most important research could be measured by like how much it changes stuff that happens in the future, like that. Off the top of my head is maybe a sensible thing to say. And surprise is one element of that. So you could say before the research, people thought the world was one way, and after something very surprising, they now updated their prior, and so they learned the world is a different way, so they do things differently. But then, like Mark was saying, the missing piece is like, well, how important was the part of the prior that changed? And maybe all that changed is we now do insignificant things very differently. And then you say, okay, so how important was that? But if we do significant things very differently, then so like I'm just saying I can see an argument for saying more surprising is better generally.
Okay. Yeah.
I had one more thought on this. Actually, it's not always good. So I would say that the replication crisis in the sciences can be traced to our addiction to surprise. So it's easier to get published if you get a surprising result. This introduces a publication bias. That's actually a huge headache because there are only so many papers that cigarettes cause cancer that you can publish. But if you suddenly discover that it doesn't or it cures something else, well, with this, they'll give you a hard time. But something that's less controversial, you'll actually get published and it will get. So we have to be very careful because we do have, as a species, an intrinsic preference for surprise that sometimes gets the better of us.
So maybe even a replication is unsurprising in some
So
sense.
it's harder to publish
published.
replications because they're less surprising, but it's very important to do them so that we know that anything is real.
Yeah.
But I think one place where surprise is definitely very good is in the proof. Sometimes even when a theorem is not surprising, if the proof is surprising, then that can be valued and useful.
Yeah, sometimes the proof is sort of as important as the theorem or as interesting as the theorem. Okay, great. Well, I did want to make sure that I didn't go past 8:30 because there's a reception waiting for us. So I'd like to thank the panelists for joining me up here. Thanks, Mark and Rotem and Matt. And I think we're ready to head out.
I'm going to grab the microphone for just one more minute before I let you all go and enjoy the reception. Thank you very much, Matt and Rotem and Mark, for being willing to sit here and answer our questions and expose yourselves a little bit. It's always a little bit challenging to actually sit there and you don't know quite what questions you're going to get or what you're going to have to do. So just before I let you go, let me just invite you to show your appreciation of the work that the Fields Institute does by considering becoming a friend of Fields. by giving us a donation of $496. So why 496? It's surprising. It's a perfect number. And a perfect number, of course, is a number which is equal to the sum of its proper factors. And I could have asked you for $28, but that's not enough. I could have asked you for $8,128, but maybe that's too much. So maybe a perfect amount of $496 is something that you might consider. And somewhere I think that there are some QR codes posted around the Institute where you might make such a donation. So at any rate, thank you so much all for being here this evening. And I hope please enjoy the reception, and I hope that you will tell all your friends about the work of the Fields Institute and come back and visit us again at all the different opportunities that we have and all the events that take place here. So thank you very much for being here. And thank you, Mark.
Thank you.